In 1986, a group of robbers emerged in the American city of Miami, but they were unlike any other criminals. They targeted cash trucks as well as banks, and they used extreme violence in every single one of their operations. They had no hesitation in opening fire. They did so purely for fun, for no apparent reason other than personal enjoyment. Their series of violent crimes continued as they mercilessly ravaged the city. Sometimes they would even carry out 2 attacks in a single day. However, they were so professional in their crimes that they left no traces of their crimes. Even FBI investigators were baffled, not knowing how to determine their true identities. But when the identities of the 2 robbers were finally revealed, it was a shock. Investigators discovered facts they had never imagined, something that had never been expected, and it came as a huge surprise to everyone. The events of our story took place in Miami, Florida in 1985. At that time, the city experienced a significant rise in crime rates, and Florida, in general, was known for its security problems. With the rise in crime rates, 2 new individuals emerged who became a source of terror for the city at the time. These 2 individuals were professional robbers who employed an extremely violent method in their operations, never hesitating to use firearms against anyone who stood in their way. Their first known attack was on October 8, 1985, when they targeted an armored cash truck parked next to a restaurant. These cash trucks play a vital role in collecting cash from businesses, such as restaurants, and then transporting it to banks. These trucks are bulletproof, and the driver and guard are usually armed. On this day, the driver was in the truck, while the guard got out to collect the money from the restaurant. However, neither the guard nor the driver knew that someone was watching them among the cars parked near the restaurant. The 2 robbers were hiding among the vehicles, both carrying heavy weapons. One was carrying a shotgun, while the other carried a mini Fortin machine gun. These weapons were military grade, not the ordinary weapons people use in their daily lives. They were wearing military clothing, masks, and black gloves. When the guard came out of the restaurant, the robbers surprised him and attacked him, demanding that he open the truck door. The guard was stunned and replied that he couldn't do it because only the driver had the keys. The robbers then threatened to kill him if he didn't open the door, so he was forced to tell them the truth. They decided to take the guard to the driver in an attempt to force him to open the doors. However, the driver was aware of the laws and protocols governing his work. According to these protocols, he was forbidden from opening the doors, no matter the threats. The driver vehemently refused, but the guard, who was in the robber's grip, knew he could only escape if given the opportunity. When he realized that the robbers were focusing their attention on the driver, the guard seized the opportunity and ran away from them. Meanwhile, the driver drove the truck away from the scene. Although the truck was armored, the 2 robbers attempted to shoot at it to stop it, demonstrating their willingness to use lethal force. Eventually, the robbers quickly retreated to their white car and disappeared. Police were immediately notified, and investigators, including the FBI, rushed to the scene, considering such incidents fall within their jurisdiction, especially since cash transfer trucks are protected by the federal government. FBI and police investigators began examining the scene and interviewing witnesses in an attempt to uncover any evidence that might help them identify the robbers. Unfortunately, they found no leads. The robbers left no trace, and witnesses reported seeing 2 men wearing masks and military uniforms. Even their skin color was unclear. The only thing investigators were able to obtain was the license plate number of the vehicle they had gotten away in. But it turned out the vehicle had been stolen a month earlier, so this was another failed attempt. When investigators questioned the truck guard who had been captured by the 2 robbers, he told them that the robbers were following professional military tactics. For example, when they opened fire on the truck, one of them fired while the other covered him. This tactic reflected military training and was inconsistent with the tactics of ordinary gangs. The only amount they managed to steal was only $2,800, a small amount compared to the scale of the crime. Investigators were convinced that the robbers would not accept this failure, so they expected them to return for another attempt. Indeed, 8 days later, on October 17, 1985, Another attempt occurred near the site of the first crime. Another cash truck was parked near a supermarket. The driver was inside the truck while the guard got out to collect the money from the supermarket. When the guard returned carrying bags of money, the driver opened the truck's back door. This was the moment the robbers had been waiting for. This time, the robbers managed to attack the truck while the guards were busy loading the money. They didn't make the same mistake as before and attacked immediately after the doors opened. One of the robbers shot the guard carrying the bags, causing him to fall to the ground despite his bulletproof vest. The second guard, the driver, was quick to return fire at the robbers, who returned fire. The goal was clear: either kill the guard or injure him, as they had done with his colleague. However, the guard put up a strong resistance, and when the two robbers realized the exchange of fire with the guard was protracted, they quickly decided to withdraw to avoid further confrontation. Within moments, police and FBI teams arrived at the scene, and the injured guard was taken to the hospital. Despite medical treatment, the guard died at the hospital after being shot in a vital area. A shotgun pellet fired at close range would have been enough to kill him, even while wearing a bulletproof vest. It was clear from the testimony of the injured driver that these robbers were the same ones who had attempted the first truck robbery near the restaurant 8 days earlier. After FBI investigators examined the spent bullet casings left behind by the robbers, they confirmed that the weapons used were the same. When they matched the bullets from the last attack with those found in the first, they confirmed that the same two robbers were behind both attacks. This discovery increased the investigators' concerns, as it became clear that the robbers were fully prepared to use violence, and they had already failed a second time in their robbery without being able to steal any money. The investigators were now certain that the robbers would try a third time. Therefore, they began to intensify their efforts to track them down before they could repeat their attempts. As they expected, it wasn't long before the robbers reappeared, and this time their target had changed. On Friday, November 8, 1985, the robbers returned, but this time their target wasn't the armored cash truck. Instead, they decided to attack a bank. They chose Florida National Bank, which had a main building alongside a smaller building known as a drive-through bank. This was a type of bank that allowed customers to withdraw money from their cars without having to get out, as if ordering from a fast food restaurant. At that moment, a cashier and a security guard were carrying bags containing cash, and they were on their way to the drive-through bank to deposit the money. The two robbers had been closely monitoring the area, and when the moment came, they quickly attacked. At gunpoint, they ordered the cashier to open the drive-through bank door, but she was extremely nervous. The cashier tried to open the door, but it seemed the keys were either lost or she couldn't find them due to her nervousness. The longer it took, the worse the situation became. The robbers shouted at her to move quickly, and when the keys fell from her hand, their anger intensified. The situation was escalating, especially since they were outside in broad daylight, which only made matters more dangerous. Despite their propensity for violence, it was clear they always preferred to leave with the least amount of damage. When they noticed the cashier taking too long to open the door, they decided to quickly withdraw, contenting themselves with the cash they had received from the guard. This time, the loot was $10,000, better than previous times, but still less than they had expected. After they left, police and FBI investigators quickly arrived on the scene. They questioned the accountant and the guard and began to link the operation to previous robberies. This bank was only a block away from the previous locations. Investigators began to notice a recurring pattern. All the robberies occurred in the same area. They knew the robbers wouldn't stop there, but they didn't anticipate what would happen next. Only an hour and a half after the drive-through bank robbery, the robbers reappeared. This time, they decided to break into another bank, a savings bank located only about 4 kilometers away. The robbers entered the bank and ordered everyone to lie on the floor. While one of them watched, the other robber approached the cashier and ordered her to give him all the available cash. After taking the money, the robbers quickly left the bank. It appears the robbers had tracked this cash truck, watched it unload the money, and then stormed the bank. When they completed their operation, they quickly escaped in a gray Chevrolet Monte Carlo, a completely different car than the white one they had used in previous operations. As expected, the car was stolen, Investigators arrived at the bank and began interviewing witnesses, but nothing new emerged. Witnesses described the two robbers with the same familiar descriptions: two masked men carrying heavy weapons. Investigators were hoping to obtain footage from the bank's surveillance cameras, but unfortunately, the cameras were faulty and not working. Investigators felt helpless, having failed to produce any clear leads after 4 robberies. All they had were conjectures. Their conjectures suggested that the robbers might have been police officers or even former Army officers, as witnesses agreed that their manner of movement, speech, and the way they carried their weapons indicated professional military tactics. After this robbery, the case went cold for a while. 2 months passed without any new operations, and the robbers disappeared from view. But they returned again on Friday, January 10, 1986. On that day, the cash truck was parked in front of Barnett Bank, while guards were unloading the money from the truck and entering the bank. At that moment, a man named William Roberts was sitting in his car. He was a customer of the bank and had come to make a deposit into his account. William noticed the 2 men wearing masks getting out of the car. This immediately raised his question. He then watched the 2 men raise their weapons and shoot the guard in the back. When the guard fell to the ground, one of the robbers shot him twice more to confirm his death. The robbers quickly carried the money from the truck, placed it in their car, and fled the scene. This time, the haul was much larger, amounting to $54,000. After the incident, William Roberts drove after the robbers. He was unusually cool-headed, showing no signs of panic despite witnessing the guard's murder. Instead, he decided to follow them. He was careful to maintain a safe distance from them, memorizing their car model and license plate number, and continued to follow them until they reached a parking lot where their car stopped next to a white pickup truck. William parked his car a distance away from them on the opposite street, keeping a close eye on them. The 2 robbers got out of their car and removed their masks, making their faces unclear to William due to the distance. However, he was able to make out their skin color, which was white. The robbers transferred the weapons and loot from their car to the white pickup truck. Unfortunately, William was unable to see the license plate number of the white pickup truck due to the distance. Meanwhile, police and FBI teams arrived at the crime scene at the bank. This wasn't just a robbery, it was a murder scene. Investigators began examining the area and interviewing witnesses and employees. When they found bullet casings at the scene, they confirmed that these were the same weapons used in previous operations. Thanks to a key witness like William, investigators were able to locate the car the robbers had abandoned and then got into the white pickup. Unfortunately, William was unable to see the license plate number of the white car, but the information he provided was crucial. After tracking down the car the thieves had abandoned, investigators discovered that the license plate number belonged to a car registered to a man named Aureliano Brill. The car had not been reported missing, leading investigators to suspect that Aureliano might have a connection to the criminals, or perhaps even be one of them. Investigators dispatched 2 of their teams to Aureliano's home. When they arrived, they rang the doorbell and a woman answered the door, introducing herself as FBI agents. The woman's husband then emerged from the house, greeted them, and asked if they had come regarding their son, Emilio. Investigators were unaware of the family member's identity, so when asked about Aureliano, their response was that he belonged to the car registered to them. The husband said, "Yes, I'm Aureliano," and invited them inside the house. After they entered, Aureliano began explaining the story to investigators. He told them that his 25-year-old son, Emilio, had disappeared 3 months earlier and had taken the family car, which was registered to him. He indicated that his son had gone to the Everfield area for a range shooting range, but had not been seen since. He added that they had filed a missing persons report with the police at that time. Investigators now understand why the car was not reported missing or stolen. The family had reported their son missing, not the car. The parents initially thought the investigators had come to provide new information about their son, but it turned out that all they knew was the car. This news effectively meant that their son had likely been harmed and would never be seen again, either dead or alive, and this was extremely frustrating for them. After interviewing the family, investigators concluded that the family was a victim of these events and had no connection to the thieves. Investigators and forensic experts thoroughly examined the vehicle, but found no fingerprints or other evidence that might lead them to the perpetrators. After the robbery, which resulted in the murder of the truck guard, the case fell into disuse again, and weeks passed without any progress. FBI investigators continued their efforts, but to no avail. In March 1986, an investigator came to the attention of a newspaper report about an attempted murder of a man named Jose Colasso. The report stated that the two men who attacked him shot him several times, then stole his weapon and his car, a black 1982 Chevrolet Monte Carlo. When the detective read this news, he immediately went to his colleagues and said, "Look at this news. I'm sure it has something to do with the criminals we're pursuing." The detective told them that the black car that had been stolen recently would soon turn up in future robberies. His colleagues didn't object, but they were a little cautious. To them, it was just a hunch, a feeling. But he was 100% sure. The news they read in the newspaper stated that Jose, the man who had been attacked, had been shot 4 times but miraculously survived. He was able to crawl to a nearby grocery store and call the police and an ambulance. He was taken to the hospital in critical condition. Although it was just a hunch, the detectives decided to take it seriously because the person with the hunch was one of the most experienced detectives, and they respected his instincts. They immediately went to the hospital to meet with Jose and hear the details of what had happened. When they reached him, his wounds were severe, with 4 bullet wounds in critical areas of his body. Despite the intense pain, Jose agreed to cooperate with them and began telling them his story. He said he was in a wilderness area called the Everglades practicing shooting, the same area where Emilio, the son of the missing couple, had disappeared. The Everglades is known for being the open wilderness of Florida, where people go hunting and weapons training. Jose said he was focused on his training when he suddenly saw a white pickup truck stop behind him. 2 strange men got out. He didn't know them, and the area was not populated enough to make their presence seem normal. Before he could act, they pointed their weapons at him and demanded that he hand over his weapon, wallet, and car keys. Jose handed them everything without resistance. They treated him very aggressively, cursing him and using obscene language even though he hadn't threatened them in any way. But despite his surrender, one of the men suddenly opened fire on him. After he fell to the ground, the man approached him and fired 3 more shots in fatal locations. Miraculously, Jose survived, pretending to be dead to escape. At the same time, the second criminal took the keys to Jose's car, a black Chevrolet Monte Carlo, and got in and started it, preparing to escape. After the first criminal was certain that Jose was dead, he got into the white pickup truck, and the 2 of them drove off together, leaving the scene. Poor Jose lay on the ground. His wounds were deep and severe, and his survival alone was a miracle. But he knew that if he remained where he was, he would die. So, with determination, he stood up, despite the intense pain, and began walking. Just imagine. He walked nearly 1.5 kilometers until he reached a small grocery store where he called for help and was called for an ambulance. The FBI was absolutely convinced that these 2 men were the same ones who carried out the robberies they had investigated. Everything Jose confirmed, the pickup truck, the weapons, the verbal and behavioral violence, all matched their description. Jose became the FBI's best witness to date, the only one to confront the criminals and survive. Investigators exploited his testimony and brought in a professional artist who drew rough sketches of the Chinese. They then distributed "wanted" posters with an explicit warning. These are heavily armed and extremely dangerous. While the FBI and police focused their search on the black car Jose had stolen, the 2 robbers struck again. On March 19, 1986, they broke into a second bank in the same area. In their usual manner, they entered with their weapons and ordered people to sleep on the floor. One of them watched the people, while the other forced the cashier to hand over the money. In the end, they escaped with a booty of approximately $30,000. After their retreat, People called the police and patrols quickly arrived and an investigation began. This was the gang's 6th robbery. Unfortunately, even with the surveillance camera footage this time, they didn't gain much from it. The thieves were skilled, leaving nothing to reveal their identities. Through analyzing the robberies, FBI investigators noticed something important. The thieves clearly monitored the cash trucks, and when a new shipment arrived at a particular bank, they quickly attacked it within 10 minutes. It wasn't about choosing a specific bank, no. They followed the same truck wherever it went. After analyzing the pattern, they learned that most of the robberies occurred on Fridays between 9 a.m. and 12 a.m., and that all of the operations occurred within a small area of no more than 10 kilometers. Accordingly, they decided to intensify police patrols there and specifically focus their attention on the stolen white pickup truck and black sedan. Days and weeks passed, and we arrived at Friday, April 11, 1986. The FBI was especially alert and intensified their patrols on this day because, according to a pattern they had observed, the robbers usually carried out their robberies on Friday mornings between 9 and 12. That day, at 8:30 a.m., 14 FBI agents gathered in a parking lot. Their plan was to sweep the entire area over the next 4 hours, covering an area of approximately 12 kilometers in diameter. They laid out a map and carefully plotted their routes. Each patrol consisted of 2 investigators, meaning 7 cars set out. Each car covered a specific part of the area with a particular focus on banks, as they knew these were prime targets for robbers. During the sweep, 2 agents, named Ben Grogan and Jerry Dove, were headed toward the Barnett Bank, which they believed was a potential target. Suddenly, a black Chevrolet Monte Carlo appeared in front of them, identical to the car stolen from Jose. When they approached it and saw the license plate, they confirmed it was the same, NTJ 891, Jose's same license plate. As soon as they saw the license plate, they knew the 2 thieves were driving the car. The shock was that the thieves didn't even bother to change the license plate, as they believed Jose was dead and hadn't informed anyone. They didn't know that he had survived and reported everything to the police. The 2 agents couldn't believe their eyes. They immediately picked up their radio and alerted all the patrols. "We're behind Jose's stolen car. We're tracking the thieves now." The rest of the patrols quickly moved toward the location their colleagues had given them. Of course, at that time, there was no GPS or Google Maps. Communication between the patrols relied on identifying locations using street names. "We're on such and such street. Turn right. Going south. Turn west," and so on. Finally, one of the FBI patrols caught up with the first patrol, which was pursuing the thieves' car, and they were 2 cars behind them. Of course, the situation became suspicious for the criminals. They started checking their mirrors and noticed 2 cars following them. To confirm their suspicions, they turned right toward a quiet residential neighborhood. However, the 2 cars kept following them. Then they turned right again, and the same thing happened with the cars still trailing them. Since 2 right turns mean you're almost circling around, the thieves were certain they were being followed. The FBI agents were trying to buy time until the other patrols arrived, because the more of them, the better chance they had of catching the thieves. Even though the thieves had spotted the chase, they weren't speeding. Instead, they turned left, heading toward the highway. This created a major problem. If they had reached the highway, the chase would have become life-threatening. Fortunately, a 3rd patrol joined the chase. There were now 3 FBI vehicles pursuing the thieves' car. At this moment, the agents directly behind the car noticed that the person in the passenger seat had raised his weapon, a clear gun. This meant one thing: the criminals were ready to fight, and they wouldn't give up easily. Agent Ben Grogan decided to flash his emergency lights and order them over the loudspeaker to stop immediately. But there was no response. The FBI vehicle moved closer, sideways, and ordered the thieves to stop again. But it was clear that the thieves had no intention of stopping. One patrol moved in and blocked the road ahead of them. A second surrounded them from the side, and a third followed. They were surrounded on all sides with the black car stuck in the middle. Amid these tense moments, with all the FBI agents shouting orders to the thieves to stop, the thieves showed no reaction. as if ignoring everything, and continued driving with cold calm. The investigators had no other option. They had to stop them by force. They began trying to swerve the thieves' car off course, but before they could complete their plan, the criminal in the passenger seat pointed his rifle at the FBI car driving alongside them. When the agent in the rear car noticed the situation, he immediately moved to support his colleagues. He wouldn't allow them to fire at them. Meanwhile, the criminals attempted a U-turn, but the agent behind them continued to pursue them until they drove into a parking lot on the side of the road. The criminal's car collided with several parked cars and came to a stop. At that moment, the criminal in the front seat pulled out his mini Fortnite and opened fire on the pursuing agent. The agent quickly got out of his car and ducked to avoid the bullets. The remaining FBI agents in pursuit joined him and began exchanging gunfire with the criminals. However, the criminals had the upper hand in terms of weaponry. While the FBI agents carried regular handguns, the criminal firing the shotgun carried a mini Fortnite, and the other criminal driving the car carried a shotgun. These heavy weapons clearly outnumbered the FBI agents. However, despite their superior weaponry, the agents were outnumbered. Despite being surrounded, the criminals refused to surrender. During this clash, the criminal driving the car hit Agent Ben Groten with one of his bullets, but the injury was not fatal. Amid the raging fire, Agent McNeil was able to accurately aim his bullet at the driver, critically wounding him in the neck. For a moment, a glimmer of hope appeared in the eyes of the FBI agents. But that hope was quickly dashed. The driver's partner, armed with a Mini 14, didn't give them a chance to catch their breath. He exploded with a heavy hail of bullets, utilizing his 30-round magazine, while the agent's pistols could barely hold 5 or 6 rounds before needing to be reloaded. The clear firepower turned the tide of the battle, and the agents began to fall one by one. A stray bullet grazed one of the agent's hands, while Edmund Morales valiantly tried to advance forward, but he was hit by a bullet that severely tore his arm apart. Amidst the inferno, amid the sounds of gunfire and the screams of the wounded, the gunman tried to climb out of the car window, but one of the agents didn't miss the opportunity, shooting him in the chest. A brief silence fell among the agents, during which they thought the criminal was finally finished. But the surprise was terrifying. The criminal got up again, as if the bullets hadn't affected him, and surprised Agent McNeil, seriously wounding him in the neck. The situation quickly became catastrophic. Most of the agents were either injured or barely able to continue fighting. Amidst the chaos, an additional support patrol arrived, from which 2 new agents jumped out and immediately joined the battlefield. But despite the injuries and reinforcements, the criminal did not retreat. He continued to maneuver with the agility of a professional assassin, moving between cars with great skill, attacking rather than defending, as if death had become a deferred option for him. He looked like a fighter who had lost everything, violently fighting a man determined to bring down as many as possible with him. With the agents' magazines limited and their ammunition rapidly running out, 3 of them were forced to retreat, not only to reload their weapons, but also to escape the tremendous pressure the criminal was imposing on them. They took cover behind a car, trying to gather their strength amidst the relentless barrage of bullets, while the criminal continued to advance steadily, as if nothing could stop him. The 3 agents, Ben Groten, Jerry Dove, and John Hanlon, were taking cover behind a car, trying to reload their pistols as quickly as possible. But the criminal, whose eyes were always on the smallest movements, captured this critical moment. With deadly intelligence and agility, he dodged the fire of the other agents who were firing at him from afar and quickly approached the 3 hiding men. Once close, he opened fire without hesitation. He hit the first agent in the hand, then fired again, hitting him in the upper thigh before turning his gun on the others. He fired at the second and third, hitting both in critical locations and killing them in their tracks within moments. The battlefield had become a complete disaster. All the agents close to the criminal were either seriously injured or killed. Only 2 agents remained, firing at him from a distance, trying in every way to stop him. At that point, the criminal decided to flee. He rushed toward one of the FBI vehicles, attempting to start it. However, the vehicle, which had been hit by dozens of bullets during the melee, failed to respond. At that crucial moment, Agent Edmund Morales, who had been wounded in the arm, had regained some of his strength. He was still holding the shotgun. Morales saw him rushing toward the vehicle, raised his weapon, and began firing relentlessly. Amidst this frenzy, the second driver, who had been critically wounded in the neck, miraculously got out of his seat. With deadly determination, he crawled through the car window to try to catch up with his partner and escape with him. Morales realized this was his last chance. He intensified his fire on the vehicle, determined not to let them escape after everything that had happened. When the last bullet from the shotgun was used up, he mustered what little strength he had left and pulled out his personal pistol. With an exhausted body and a wounded arm, he struggled to get up from the ground. Morales himself later said that he was unaware of what was happening around him, and that his severe injuries should have left him completely paralyzed, but the adrenaline pumped incredible strength through his veins. He slowly advanced toward the car, raising his pistol, until he was just meters away from the criminals. Without hesitation, he opened fire at them from point-blank range, emptying his pistol into their bodies. He continued firing until he was certain they were dead, thus ending the most violent street battle the city had ever seen. Shortly after, emergency personnel and ambulances arrived at the scene and immediately began treating the injured agents. The scene was tragic and extremely violent. 5 FBI agents were seriously injured, 2 of whom lost their lives, and the 2 criminals were also killed. This confrontation has gone down in FBI history as the bloodiest battle they have ever faced. Afterward, a decision was made to upgrade the agents' armaments with more powerful and effective weapons. As for the 2 agents who were killed in this confrontation, they were Agent Jerry Dove, who was only 30 years old, Agent Ben Grogan, who was 53 years old and had only 1 year left before his retirement. These 2 were the same 2 agents who first spotted the criminal's car. It's very painful to think that if they hadn't encountered them that morning, they might have been able to live their lives in peace. The hero who ended the battle and killed the criminals was Agent Edmund Morales, who was later honored with the Federal Valor Medal, becoming the first FBI agent in the agency's history to receive this award. Morales later wrote a book documenting every detail of the encounter and his experience, moment by moment. Of course, all the events in the entire battle were officially documented. They even drew precise maps showing the locations of the vehicles and agents and their movements during the engagement, based on the testimonies of the surviving agents. And the surprise? During the engagement, more than 143 bullets were fired. The number of bullets was calculated from the spent cartridges collected from the ground. This raised the big question: who were these 2 men? And why did they do all this? From fingerprints collected from the bodies, investigators identified them. The first was Michael Platt, 32 years old, who owned the Mini Fortune rifle and was responsible for the deaths of the 2 agents and most of the injuries. The second was William Maddox, 34 years old, who used a shotgun. The real surprise was that the 2 weren't professional criminals or gang members. No, on the contrary, they were businessmen with families, children, and seemingly normal lives. The strange thing is that, despite everything, the 2 had a simple landscaping business. Imagine, people who spend their normal day decorating gardens and planting flowers. Their lives seemed completely normal. They had friends they would go out with to play golf, had excellent social relationships, and treated those around them with respect and kindness. They had no criminal records or prior convictions. It was as if they were living a double life, a kind face that people would see, and a dark, criminal face that they hid from everyone. As the investigation continued, the FBI discovered important information about them. Both had previously served in the U.S. Army. Their acquaintance began there, and the one closest to violence was Michael Platt, who was an officer in the Special Forces, specifically the Rangers, the elite military unit. He was a highly skilled marksman. It's important to note that the training gap between military Special Forces personnel and FBI agents is enormous. FBI agents' training is more defensive, and their goal is often to capture criminals alive. Special forces, on the other hand, are trained offensively, aiming for direct killing during wartime. This became clear during the confrontation, as Platt maneuvered and advanced against them with all his might and tactics, despite his small number. During the search, investigators discovered a cabin owned by the Special Forces. They found ammunition stores and other weapons inside, including Jose's stolen rifle. But the investigation had barely begun. Over time, investigators discovered even stranger things. Each of the men had been married before their current marriages, and their previous wives had died under very mysterious circumstances. Regarding William Maddox, his ex-wife, Patricia Maddox, was a lab technician. In December 1983, while she was at work with a colleague, an unknown man entered the lab and brutally assaulted them. Their bodies were later found. Their hands were bound and their throats were horribly cut. William was one of the suspects, but there was insufficient evidence to convict him. However, after her death, he received a $350,000 insurance claim. As for Michael Platt, his wife died in December 1984 from a gunshot wound to the mouth. The police classified the case as a suicide at the time, especially since the gun was in her hand. However, everyone who knew her confirmed that she was a happy person and had no suicidal tendencies. Furthermore, she and Platt had many problems before her death. This led to a strange theory that the two had agreed to get rid of each other's wives. But without conclusive evidence, these remained mere theories. And here we come to the end of our story for today. If you like the story, don't forget to support us with a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell to stay up to date.